Catherine Webb was exactly the person Claudette had described. She moved through houses the way certain women move through rooms, with complete authority, no wasted motion, an encyclopedic knowledge of what things were worth, and an uncanny ability to read what a person actually needed rather than what they said they were looking for. She showed me 5 houses in 6 hours. The 4th one stopped me at the gate. It was a Georgian colonial in the Buckhead neighborhood. 4 bedrooms, a library that ran the full length of the east wall, a sunroom that faced a garden, and a backyard with a mature wisteria that had been climbing the stone wall for what the listing said was 30 years, and what I could see simply by looking at it had been there longer than that. Built in 1941, fully restored in 2019. Listed at $1.1 million. The sellers had relocated to London. They wanted to close quickly. I stood in the doorway of the library and I looked at the shelves, empty, waiting, and I thought about Thomas. About the 34 years of books we had accumulated together that were still in storage because I had never had the right room to put them in. I thought, this is the room they were waiting for. I said to Catherine, full asking price, cash, how quickly can we close? She did not even blink. 10 days if they're motivated. They are, I said, so am I. I signed the purchase agreement the following afternoon in Claudette's office. Claudette slid the folder across the desk with the particular satisfaction of a woman who had kept a significant secret for 14 years and was finally, with complete authorization, allowed to let it go. She said, "You're sure about the acceleration clause?" It was not a question. "They signed the agreement," I said. "They owe me $97,400 with accrued interest. It will come as a shock." "Most consequences do," I said. I moved out on a Wednesday morning, 11 days after the night I had heard Sandra's voice through the open window. I had arranged a small moving company, 2 men named Gerald and his nephew Marcus, who worked with the quiet competence of people who have carried other people's lives up and down staircases 1,000 times and understand in their bones that every box represents something that mattered to someone. Sandra's car was gone. The children were at school. Daniel was at work. I had chosen the timing deliberately. Not from cowardice. I had said everything I needed to say to Daniel the morning after, standing in that doorway, but from mercy. Some conversations do not need an audience. Some endings are more dignified when witnessed only by the people directly involved. I left an envelope on the kitchen table. Inside, that month's $600 contribution folded neatly. A house key, and a note that read, "Thank you for the time here. I have found my own home. I wish your family every good thing. Please don't forget to water the fern on the kitchen windowsill. It is more resilient than it looks." Elizabeth I drove away with Aretha Franklin on the radio. I say a little prayer, which felt both entirely appropriate and slightly theatrical, which is exactly the combination I had always preferred. The house on Peachtree Battle Avenue was mine. My name on the deed, bought with my money, earned through my husband's family legacy and 14 years of careful, patient silence. I stood in the empty library and looked at the walls that were waiting for Thomas's books. I said to the room, to wherever Thomas was, "We did it, love. We found the right room." Claudette made the call to Daniel on a Thursday afternoon. She told me about it afterward with the chronological precision she brought to everything. She identified herself. She told him this was a financial matter relevant to his family planning. She asked if he had time to come to her office. He arrived at 3:20. She placed the documents on the desk in order. First, the investment account statement from Howard Gaines. Current balance, $11,847,203. Daniel stared at it. "My mother has $11 million, he said. "Approximately, yes. She has been giving us $600 a month and sleeping in our guest room and eating dinner with us every night for almost 2 years. That was her choice. The contributions were entirely voluntary." He picked up the document, set it down, picked it up again. The gesture of a man trying to recalibrate something fundamental about the world he believed he was living in. "She told us the loan was just for tax purposes. She said she was never going to call it due. Your mother is invoking the acceleration clause per Section 5 of the signed agreement. The outstanding balance with accrued interest is $97,412. Full payment is due within 60 days. Claudette told me the silence in her office lasted nearly 2 full minutes. Then Daniel said, "Does Sandra know about any of this? I am only authorized to discuss this with the signatory. You will need to inform your wife." He drove home. He called Sandra. I do not know exactly what happened in that house when they sat down together. I was not there. I was in my new library unpacking Thomas's books, finding their places on the shelves, running my fingers along the spines of things we had read together over 41 years. But I know what happened next, because Daniel left me a voicemail that evening. I have listened to it many times. His voice on that recording was something I had never heard from my son in 44 years of knowing him. Not anger, not grief, exactly. Something underneath both of those things. The sound of a man who has just understood the full weight of what he has allowed to happen, not to himself but to someone else. The sound of genuine shame. The quiet, particular devastation of a person whose map of his own character has just been revised in a way he cannot rationalize away. Mom, I don't know what to say. I know you heard us that night. I know you heard what Sandra said and what I said and what I didn't say. And I know now that you have been, that this whole time I need you to know that I am ashamed of myself. Not because of the money. I am ashamed because of what we said about you, because of what I let happen in my own house, because I chose quiet over right and called it keeping the peace. Please call me back. Please. I did not call back, not that night. Sandra called 3 times. I did not answer. I sat in the sunroom and watched the wisteria move in the evening wind, and I thought about what justice looks like when you have the means and the will and the clarity to pursue it completely. I thought about Thomas, who had always been of the two of us the more forgiving, who used to say that grace was not softness, it was precision, that you extended it exactly where it had the possibility of taking root, not where it would simply be absorbed without consequence, not where it would be mistaken for weakness. I was not sure yet where it could take root. I needed to watch a little longer. The calls came in waves over the following 12 days. Daniel's voicemails moved through stages I could track with the clarity of someone who had spent her career studying how people process information that challenges their self-image. First, disbelief. Mom, can we just talk? I think there's been a misunderstanding about what Claudette said. Second, accountability, partial. I know we handled things badly. I know I know you heard things you shouldn't have had to hear. Third, something closer to actual reckoning. Mom, I've been sitting with this. I've been sitting with who I was in that house, and I don't like what I see. Sandra's messages were different. They started with logistics and moved haltingly toward something more personal. Her third message, left on a Tuesday evening, was only 40 seconds long. Elizabeth, I've been thinking about something you said when you first moved in. You said you wanted to pay the household contribution because you didn't want to feel like a burden. I realize now that I made you feel like one anyway. Not because of what you cost us, because of how I talked about you. I'm sorry. I don't expect that to fix anything. I just needed to say it. I listened to that message 4 times. There are 2 kinds of apology, the kind that explains and the kind that admits. Explanations are about the person giving them. Admissions are about the person who was harmed. Sandra had given me in 40 seconds something I had not expected from her, an admission. I filed it. I watched. And then on day 13, Benjamin called me from Daniel's phone. He was 6 years old. He had recently lost his 2 front teeth and spoke with an endearing whistle that made certain words sound like small musical events. Grandma Elizabeth, it's me. Dad said you moved to a new house. Lily wants to know if it has a yard. She's been asking if you're coming back every day, and Mom says you're not, but you're not far. I pressed my hand against my mouth. Dad has been really quiet. Benjamin continued in that unself-conscious way children have of reporting what they observe without understanding what they are revealing. And Mom made his favorite dinner 2 nights in a row, which is what she does when she thinks she did something wrong. Did somebody do something wrong, Grandma? 6 years old, reading the room with perfect accuracy. Thomas would have loved this boy completely. Grown-ups sometimes make mistakes, I said. Big ones. And then they have to spend time figuring out what to do about them. That's what your mom and dad are doing right now. Are you still my grandma? The question opened something in my chest that I had been keeping carefully closed. I will be your grandma every single day for the rest of my life. That is not something that changes. Can we come see your new house? Saturday morning, I said. You and Lily. I will make pancakes. I have a backyard with wisteria that has been growing for 30 years, and I need someone to tell me what they think of it. I could hear him relay this information to Lily in a loud and thoroughly unsubtle whisper. Her response was immediate and loud and completely herself. I hung up and sat for a moment in the quiet of the library. Then I called Claudette. I'm ready for the next step, I said. Schedule the meeting. My sister Carol drove up from Charlotte for the occasion. She had, characteristically, also cooked enough food to sustain a small village through a moderate winter. This is who Carol has always been. A woman who responds to emotional complexity with extraordinary quantities of food, and who is right about this approach more often than anyone who hasn't tried it would expect. 11 people gathered in my new living room on a Saturday afternoon in December. Family. 2 of my longest friendships. My pastor from the church I had returned to since moving. And Daniel and Sandra, who arrived together, side by side, holding hands in the way that people hold hands when they are both frightened and have decided to be frightened together rather than separately. I noticed that. I noted it as data. Daniel spoke first. He stood in the center of the room and did not look at the floor once. 2 months ago, my mother told Sandra and me that she had been diagnosed with breast cancer. She came home from her appointment alone, sat at our table, and told us the diagnosis, the staging, the treatment plan. She kept her voice steady. She was trying to reassure us. She was the one with cancer, and she was trying to reassure us. He paused. That same night, Sandra and I had a conversation about whether my mother should continue living with us. We didn't know she could hear it. We talked about her like she was a logistical challenge, like she was an arrangement that had become inconvenient. Not like a person who had spent nearly 2 years showing up for our children every day. Not like a mother. He looked at me directly. I am ashamed of that conversation. I am ashamed of what I said. I am more ashamed of what I didn't say. Because I could have said something. I could have pushed back. I chose not to. I chose quiet over right, and I called it keeping the peace, and there is no version of that choice that I can look at honestly and feel good about. The room was very still. Sandra stood. She was not a woman who cried publicly. She was not crying now. But she had the look of someone who has put everything she has into a single sustained effort of honesty and is not certain she has enough left for what comes after. I said things about Elizabeth that I cannot take back. I called her a burden. I spoke about her like she was a problem to be solved rather than a person to be loved. I told myself I was being practical. I was being selfish, and I was being cowardly. I was afraid of something I didn't know how to face, and I said things that were unkind and untrue and that Elizabeth did not deserve. She stopped, started again. I am sorry, not because of what we learned about her finances, because she was generous and patient and present for 2 years in my house and in my children's lives, and she deserved better from the person her son married. My pastor looked at me. Elizabeth, what would you like to say? I stood. I had written things down. I had crossed them out and rewritten them and made 3 separate drafts. I had brought none of them. In the end, the right words are almost never the prepared ones. I accept what you have both said today, I said. I believe you mean it. But meaning something and being something are 2 different things, and that difference is what the next several years are going to have to demonstrate. I opened the folder I had brought. These are my terms. They are not negotiable and they are not punitive. They are simply what I require in order to move forward. I had printed the document on Claudette's letterhead. I gave Daniel a copy, Sandra a copy, and placed one on the coffee table for the witnesses. Outstanding debt, $97,412, reduced to $50,000 as an act of good faith. Payment schedule, $800 per month, no additional interest until paid in full. No further financial requests will be considered or entertained. Personal terms, family therapy. Minimum 8 months, weekly sessions, both parties present and engaged. Grandchildren visits at my home on my schedule, not subject to negotiation for the first year. 80 hours of volunteer service each, Daniel and Sandra, at a senior care facility in their county, to be completed within 12 months. Documented and verified. An explicit and binding agreement that the children are never to be placed in the middle of adult matters. Not now, not at any future point. Estate planning review to be conducted annually based on demonstrated behavioral change over time. Sandra looked up from the paper when she reached the volunteer requirement. 80 hours, she said quietly. You told my son you were not a caregiver, I said. I think you should find out whether that is actually true before you decide. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she nodded. They both signed. Claudette and Carol signed as witnesses. My pastor said a short prayer. Not the kind that asks for things. The kind that simply acknowledges that what has been asked of everyone in the room is genuinely hard and genuinely worth the difficulty. When it was over, Sandra approached me before she and Daniel left. She did not reach for my hand. She stood at a measured distance, the distance of someone who understands that certain things are still being rebuilt and cannot be rushed. She said, Elizabeth, I want you to know something. I started the volunteer hours 3 weeks ago. Before today, I didn't want to show up here empty-handed. I'm not telling you for credit. I just wanted you to know. I looked at her for a moment. Tell me about it next time I see you, I said. That was all. But it was something. It was the first thing that had the feeling of a genuine beginning. The Saturday pancake mornings became the steadiest thing in my week. Benjamin and Lily arrived at 10 every Saturday through the winter and into the spring. Benjamin wanted chocolate chip. Lily wanted plain with extra syrup, with the definition of extra changing every week in ways that kept me appropriately challenged. I learned to make 3 batches. We ate at the kitchen table under the east window where the morning light came in warm and yellow and reliable, and Lily always chose the chair that faced the backyard so she could watch the wisteria. Grandma Elizabeth, she said one Saturday in February, her chin resting on her folded arms on the table, watching the bare vine against the stone wall. When does that plant get flowers? Late April, usually, sometimes early May. Can we have a party under it when it does? I think that's an excellent idea. Can Mommy come? I looked at her 4-year-old face, the complete openness of it, the way children ask the hardest questions in the lightest voices, with no awareness that they are hard. I think that would be a very good idea, I said. Through Claudette's quarterly updates, I tracked the changes carefully. Therapy, continuing. The counselor reported genuine engagement, not performance, not compliance, but the harder thing, which is actual willingness to see yourself clearly. Sandra's volunteer hours, completed by March, 60 days ahead of schedule, she had continued beyond the requirement, signing up for a standing Thursday shift at the senior center without being asked. Daniel, more present at home, coaching Benjamin's weekend soccer team, cooking dinner 3 nights a week, monthly payments arriving on the 1st of each month, sometimes a few days early. My own life had become fuller than it had been in years. I had joined a book group at the Buckhead Library that met on Wednesday evenings and had the specific, irreplaceable quality of arguments about books where everyone is genuinely invested. I had accepted a part-time consulting role advising a history curriculum project at a middle school in Decatur, a position that turned out to be the most intellectually alive I had felt since leaving the classroom. I swam 4 mornings a week. My surgery had gone well. The radiation had been completed. Dr. Reeves had told me at my 6-month follow-up that she was very pleased with everything she was seeing. I was well. I was genuinely, substantively well. I began slowly and without announcement to let them back in. Sandra called me in April, not about money, not about schedules, not about the children. She called because she had spent a Thursday morning at the senior center helping a woman named Ruth move from her room to a smaller one. The facility needed the space, and Ruth was 81 and had not been consulted about the timing. And Ruth had cried while they packed her photographs, and Sandra had sat on the edge of the narrow bed and cried with her without knowing why exactly, only that something about it required it. Afterward, Sandra had driven to a parking lot and called me because she did not know what to do with what she was feeling. I kept thinking about Ruth's family, she said. They don't come very often. She mentioned it twice while we were packing. Just mentioned it, like it was simply a fact about her life, not something she expected to change. She paused, and I kept thinking about you, about how I talked about you that night, like you were a logistics problem. You were afraid, I said. People say things they cannot take back when they're afraid of something they don't understand. That doesn't make it. No, I agreed. It doesn't. A long silence. I'm going to keep going with the Thursdays, she said. After the hours are done, I signed up for a permanent slot. I know, I said. You know? Ruth attends my church, I said. She mentioned a very capable young woman who comes every Thursday and always arrives a few minutes early. A pause, and then Sandra laughed. A surprised, unguarded laugh, the kind that comes when something catches you entirely off guard. And I heard in it the first sound that had the quality of something real between us. Not managed, not performed. Real. I updated my will in June. I called Claudette and told her to increase Daniel and Sandra's combined inheritance from the figure I had set the previous autumn, a figure that reflected where we were then, to $400,000, contingent on continued demonstrated effort through a 5-year review. I did not tell them. The point was not the amount. The point was that I was watching and that effort was visible to me, and that grace, when it is real and not simply compliance, can be earned even after it has been forfeited. I did not tell them because I wanted to see if they would continue when there was nothing obvious left to gain. They continued. In September, 1 year after the diagnosis that had set all of this in motion, I hosted a dinner at the house on Peachtree Battle Avenue. Daniel came early and helped me move the chairs onto the back porch. His wife brought a sweet potato pie she had learned from her grandmother's recipe, and it was, frankly, better than mine, and I told her so without reservation, which made her laugh in the way that genuine compliments make people laugh when they are not expecting them. Benjamin narrated the entire evening as though he were a sports commentator, which he had been doing since school started, and which everyone had agreed was both exhausting and wonderful. Lily wore a dress with deep pockets and spent most of the evening with both hands jammed into them, surveying the yard from beneath the wisteria, which had bloomed magnificently in May and was now preparing, in its dignified autumn way, to let its leaves go. After the children had gone inside to watch a movie, Daniel and I sat on the porch in the dark. He had his father's hands, broad, still, resting on his knees the way Thomas's always had when he was present in a moment rather than moving through it. "Mom," he said, "I need to ask you something I'm not sure I have the right to ask." "Ask it. Did you know? When you moved in, did you know from the beginning that this might happen?" I thought about how to answer that honestly, because honest is the only way I know how to answer things that matter. "I hoped it wouldn't," I said. "I hoped that being there, being present, might teach you both something without anyone having to be taught. I wanted to be wrong about what I was worried about." "But you planned for the possibility. Your father used to say, 'Hope for the best. Document everything.'" Daniel was quiet for a moment. "He would have done what you did. He would have walked away and left the door open." "Yes," I said, "and he would have left the light on." Daniel reached over and took my hand briefly. He did not say anything. He did not need to. Inside, Lily was demanding that Benjamin rewind something he claimed he had already rewound twice. Benjamin was explaining, with the long-suffering patience of an older sibling who has accepted his fate, why this was not possible. Sandra's voice, warm, unhurried, the voice of someone who had put in the work of learning how to be present, mediated the dispute with the ease of practice. I sat on my own porch, in my own house, bought with my own money, earned through my husband's legacy and 14 years of careful patience, surrounded by the imperfect, genuine, irreplaceable noise of a family learning, slowly, imperfectly, with real effort, what it owed the people it loved. The wisteria held its shape against the dark yard. Somewhere down the street, a neighbor's dog was barking at something it would never catch. I thought about Thomas. I thought about the 30 acres of Georgia scrubland, and the salt marsh, and the extraordinary sunsets that his father had said were worth everything. I thought about how long things wait before they become what they were always meant to be. I thought about 34 years of standing in classrooms, telling young people that history is not what happened. It is what people chose to do with what happened. I wrote in my journal that night, the same journal I had kept since the October night I heard Sandra's voice through the open window. Thomas, we built something real. It did not survive perfectly, but it survived. And now our son is learning, in the hard way that some things can only be learned, what real actually means. I think you knew this was coming. I think that's why you were always so careful about the locks. I am exactly where I chose to be. The wisteria bloomed this spring. You would have loved it. The sick old woman they wanted gone is right here. 72 years old, in the most beautiful house I have ever owned. Grandmother to 2 children who call every Sunday without being reminded, and sitting with something that feels quietly and without drama, exactly like enough. She is not gone at all. She is exactly where she chose to be. And that, in the end, is everything. If you're watching this and something in it sounds familiar, something that makes your chest tighten, something that makes you think of a conversation you heard through a wall or a door, something that makes you think of a name that was used to describe you as if you had already left the room, then I need you to hear me. You are not too old to protect yourself. You are not too soft to be strategic. You are not obligated to perform gratitude for treatment you did not deserve. And the people who would use your tenderness against you are counting on you to believe that love means giving without limits and accepting without question. It does not. Love has a right to be careful. Love has a right to be documented. Love has a right to say, this is what I require, and I will know by whether you give it, whether it is possible between us. My husband Thomas left me with more than money. He left me with the example of a man who loved through action, who prepared for difficulty, who never once let me feel alone, even in the years after he was gone. He left the lights on. Wherever you are, whatever room you are sitting in, whatever version of this story is currently unfolding around you, I hope someone is leaving the lights on for you. And I hope you have the courage to open the door. If this story stayed with you, please share it with someone who needs it. And if you have your own story, one you have been told is too small or too late or too quiet to matter, it matters. It has always mattered. And when a woman finally tells the truth she has been protecting, the whole world leans in to hear it.